The danger of doing a car stop is overwhelming, and people don't realize it, especially when they've got tinted windows and you can't see who's inside the car or what they're doing.
He actually was hiding under a porch, and when I went to go get him, it was dark. Took a swipe at me with a knife, little knife, and he got me in the on my forehead. I was
He scalped you.
almost, yeah, I still got the scar.
I'm at the rear of the car, like by the rear right bumper, and I hear the shot and I hit the ground, and the next thing I know, it sounds like machine gun fire. Like, everybody's shooting into the car. There's shards of glass landing all over me.
I think we have 120,000 gang members here. We're outgunned, so we need all that training. We certainly don't need training where you're doing mandatory sitting behind a computer, clicking right.
And all the chiefs were talking about DEI instead of crime. And I was like, what's going on here? We've lost our way. The profession is called law enforcement.
I hope that this is on the way back up and things start to change and maybe common sense comes back, because the city of Chicago deserves that.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Wearing the Badge. I'm Gary McCarthy, and tonight we're going to have a very interesting, action-packed conversation. Being a police officer is obviously a very dangerous thing to do. I like to point out that every time you take a gun off the street, you're in an armed confrontation with a criminal, and it could go bad at any time. Cops get hurt, cops get killed, unfortunately, on a very regular basis. My guest tonight is Dan O'Toole. Dan is a 24-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department, just retired, I believe, last year. And Dan, I first met when he came in for an interview for promotion. And I read his resume before he came in, and he had been shot, he had been stabbed twice, I believe, and hit by a car. And, you know, how you keep going when those things keep happening is pretty incredible. And then I found out that he was also a United States Marine, which is near and dear to my heart, being raised by my dad, who I always say it would have been easier to join the Marine Corps than get raised by my dad, Jim McCarthy. So without further ado, this is Dan O'Toole and myself, and we're going to talk about Dan's career in the Chicago Police Department.
So when I got shot, it was July of 2009, and I was part of a citywide search warrant team, and we were out on narcotics, and that's all we did. We did search warrants every day, and we were together for, I think, just over 4 years at that point, and we had done, I think, over 1,000 search warrants as a team. So everybody on that team was very qualified, great teammates. You know, I really owed them a lot, but also trusted them with my safety, and I needed that day. So this was the first, if my memory's correct, it was the first search warrant we were doing that day of two. Second one was going to be out west. This one was at 112th Place in Michigan Avenue. We're on Michigan Avenue right now, but same exact street, but 115 blocks south of where we are. That's in the Roseland neighborhood. So George Martinez was the afternoon of the search warrant, and he kind of just gave us a heads up with my sergeant, Sergeant Steck, and told us that, explained who the drug dealer was, that he was going to be in the house. I think we did a little surveillance to make sure he was in there. He was. And then we were looking for a good amount of crack cocaine and some guns. So as we approached the house, I remember, and this is kind of, as a policeman, you remember this kind of stuff, but it's how quickly things can change. The resident comedian on the team, Dave Guzman, had said something funny, and I remember this clearly. And as we were approaching from the alley to hit this two-flat apartment from the rear, I just remember he said something funny, and we were all laughing. It was like really funny, and we just had to control ourselves and like I kind of even said something like, just let's get composed here because we're about to blast the store. And within seconds, that's exactly what we did. So once we're in the house, I saw on my right, really quickly, I saw a little dinette kitchen, and there was 2 or 3 little kids at that table eating. And I remember they were young, like tender age children. And Directly across that, that was to my right, to my left, was a door. It was a bedroom door and it was locked. So my partner and I at the time, Scotty McKenna, we started to kick down the door. We needed to get inside this bedroom door. And as we were kicking it down, we were both shot. I had no idea that Scotty had been shot. I knew I was, but I didn't know Scotty was shot till maybe 45 minutes later, and we were both at Christ Hospital on 95th Street. So um, quickly, to my right, right after I got shot, was George Martinez showed up, and we were kind of shoulder to shoulder, and he had the rifle. So now we're both continuing a gunfight into the bedroom. George kind of takes over for me, and I went to the back of the same exact place I just came from. I remembered as we went into the back door, there was a window that looked into this bedroom that that the offender was in. So I went back, and I kind of pulled myself up that window. I saw the offender shooting, and continued the gunfight, reloaded. And one of the reasons we wanted to get rid of this threat is because I really thought that he was going to shoot these kids. And I thought, what's going to happen? You know, the city of Chicago is going to somehow blame the police department on that. And we were there literally just trying to do a good job and help this community out. So continue the gunfight. At some point I collapsed. I couldn't take the weight on my leg anymore. And Sergio Martinez, who was on my team, another teammate, I remember him just kind of scooping me up, bringing me down the stairs, back to like the backyard, and pretty quickly ambulance was there. I even think Sergio put a tourniquet on my leg, helped stop the bleeding, and I was taken over to Christ Hospital. And I don't know if this is exactly true, but I think that the superintendent and the mayor, which would have been Mayor Daley, and it would have been Jody Weiss was the superintendent. I think they were there at the hospital waiting for us. They were there really fast, and they were both. And that's where I saw Scotty to my right. He was also, you know, he'd been shot too, same kind of injury I had to the leg, and the superintendent, and I just remember him talking to me, and then with the mayor, and I had no idea what he was saying because I was in that gunfight in that hallway, and my ears were like blown out. So maybe 4 or 5 days I couldn't hear really. And, you know, by the grace of God, I wasn't severely injured. I was able to get back to work in a month and a half. And this is 11 days after George Martinez and I had been in another shooting out west. So it was a busy time in our career. And, you know, I just, you know, really thank all the people that were with me. And I was very fortunate my whole career to work with fantastic policemen. And, you know, I'm here right now just because of them. Sure.
Why'd you get stabbed twice? You couldn't get out of the way?
First one was just a foot chase. It was in the 15th district. I think I saw somebody with a gun. So I got with a gun and some heroin at Quincy and Long. And then he started going, ran across Madison Avenue, west side. I chased him. And then I think I got him maybe a block, maybe around Washington. But he actually was hiding under a porch, and when I went to go get him, it was dark. Took a swipe at me with a little knife, and he got me on my forehead.
He scalped you?
Almost, yeah, I still got the scar. And then the second time, I was a sergeant in Inglewood, 68th and Wood. I was with a couple guys. I was riding with a couple guys, and we saw a car we knew was dirty. We knew it was not a good car. Probably had some crime involved. So we pulled it over pretty quickly. Emil Domer was on my team, and he went to the driver's side. I went to the passenger side. He called up gun right away with the passenger. So I didn't know he was about to fight with him and his partner were about to fight with the driver. But I was fighting now with the passenger. I had to get the gun away from him, and he was just doing anything he could to get away from me. And he had no T-shirt on. It was middle of summer, and I was just doing anything I could just not let him go. Turns out he was an armed habitual. I ended up putting him in custody while we were fighting. You probably can relate to this. When you're fighting with somebody and your elbow hits the ground, I didn't know I was stabbed. It just felt like pain, and turns out he had stabbed me through my elbow. So kind of had problems with one of my nerves in my elbow after that. But And I'd also like to say too that when I was fighting with him, and there's a video of this, there's like 7 people from the neighborhood surrounding us with cell phones, not helping at all, just basically screaming at me that I was about to go to jail and that they're going to have my paycheck. Could use their help at that moment, but and it all worked out. My partners put him in. These guys put their guy in custody, that helped me out, so it worked out. But I was fine.
Well, so you made me think of three separate stories. I'll do them one at a time. When I was a lieutenant in the emergency service, it was
York.
in New York.
Okay.
Yeah, ESU. We like to say if a civilian needs help, they call 911, and if a cop needs help, they call emergency service. It's 6 months of training in the police academy to go on a job, and then it's 4 months to get trained up to do everything that ESU does. Rope rescue, confined space, hazmat, sniper, SWAT, the whole 9 yards. Best job I ever had, to the point where I only had 11 years on the job. When my promotion to captain came, and I almost turned it down because ESU was such a great job. Just
Right.
think about that.
Right.
But I'm in the middle of Harlem. I'm at 125th Street and Lenox Avenue, and two guys literally get into a shootout over the hood of my car. It was like a light blue Caprice, like this color,
Sure.
and they didn't recognize it as a police car. And I'm like, hey, cut that out, you guys. You can take somebody's eye out with that thing, right? So the traffic is stopped, and one guy goes this way, and the other guy goes that way. Now, I make a U-turn, and this guy hops into a taxi cab, like 3 cars back. I cut off the taxi cab. I come out. I take the guy out of the car, but he dumps the gun out the other side of the taxi, and the taxi takes off. So now I'm literally kneeling on this guy's back in the middle of 125th Street and Lenox Avenue. And the gun is like 15, 20 feet away, and out comes the cameras, and out comes the crowd.
Right.
And I get on the radio, and it's the one and only time in New York an assist patrolman is called a 1013. In Chicago, it's called a 101. And I get on the radio, and I said, U4, 1013, 125 in Lenox. But I was very calm. And the dispatcher is 10-5, in other words, say it again. And I said, U4, 1013, 125 in Lenox. All of a sudden, she's like, lights and sirens, they blasted off. I end up cuffing the guy and pulling him over and getting the gun. Now I'm sitting on top of him in the middle of the street with the crowd around me. And I swear it took 10 minutes for somebody to get there, but it was probably only about
2 minutes. Yeah.
Probably 2 minutes.
Seems like fraud.
And that was a moment where it's like, what do I do here? There's a gun there. There's a crowd, a hostile crowd. I got this guy. Do I let go of him and get the gun? Right?
Yeah, they don't cover that in a police academy.
No, they don't. And fortunately it worked out. But, I'd been shot at a number of times. One time in particular by cops. And
Friendly fire.
yeah, and you know what? It's a real dangerous thing. That's why tactics are so important. Right, tactics and training, which I want to pick up on. But this was a scenario where two white kids from the suburbs thought it was a good idea to go down to Harlem and stick up a couple of crack dealers. So they get into a gun battle on the street, and there happens to be a police car coming by, and they take off after the kids, the white kids who jump. They weren't kids, they were adults. They were probably older than me. I was only 23. Right? They get back in their car and they take off, and it turns into a vehicle pursuit that lasts about a half hour going up into Yonkers. And this is on a 12 to 8 tour. There's not a lot going on. We get involved in a chase. It's going up the Major Deegan Expressway. And at the end of the chase, they have no tires left, and they're doing serpentine, right? And finally, they stop. So now I'm close to the car, and I get out of the car, and I'm not running up to the car. It's over. They got the guys. But what happened was the cop stuck his gun in the driver's side window, and he's fighting now with the driver over the gun. And finally he says, "Screw this!" Boom. And the 6 cops standing around the car all thought, well, a round came out of the car and they all opened up. So
Like the bad guy had shot.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So there's 6 cops shooting into the car from different directions. I'm at the rear of the car, like by the rear right bumper, and I hear the shot and I hit the ground. And the next thing I know, it sounds like machine gun fire. Like everybody's shooting into the car. There's shards of glass landing all over me. I'm holding on to the ground, waiting for the gunfire to stop. I open my eyes, and there's a gun about 3 feet away that came out of the car. I was like, "Oh, look at this! Grand jury overtime." Right. So I picked up the gun, and I ended up getting about 40 hours overtime. But it was my first experience with almost getting shot by cops. And they run him, and it turns out that he had just gotten out of prison after doing 6 years in the penitentiary for shooting somebody on that corner. And he was there that night to take his corner back. And the short end of that story is we prevented a murder by engaging somebody for drinking a beer on the street. And when I went back on my career, there's probably 5 or 6 different scenarios where when I was a lieutenant, there came a time when I had to consider whether or not I wanted to go on patrol because it was the Wild West. It was the 1990 in New York City. And we were in one of the worst places in the city. The .9 square miles around Yankee Stadium, breaks my heart to say that, but the poorest congressional district in the country, highest per capita AIDS. And it was the Wild West. There were 13 police-related shootouts there in my first 11 months that I was there. .9 square miles.
I'm a history nut, and I know about that time in New York, and it's unbelievable because your 70s, 80s, and 90s were really out of control. And you guys had 3 mayors in a row that had the right. It was Dinkins, then Ed Koch, and then Giuliani. Am I right
No,
about that?
Koch, Dinkins, Giuliani.
But then you finally got it under control, and now you guys have New York has 1/3 of the crime with 3 times the population as Chicago does right now.
Yeah, and
I right?
I'm not sure what the numbers are at
But-
this point, Danny, but New York is 3 times the size of Chicago. Everything about it. And you know, when I was here, I was happy that we got down to 1964 murder rates, and that was no accident. That was because of strategy, planning, supervision, training, and guys like you who were carrying it out. So none of that was by accident. But let's talk a little bit about training. Let's talk about some of the training that you went to, what you learned from it, and how it kicks in when you need it. It's really freaky the way that happens, right?
So I guess I was fortunate to be maybe pushed into more training than a lot of guys were. I had gone out to LAPD. I trained out there, Appleton, Wisconsin with the DEA. I did a lot of entry stuff, a lot of room entry stuff over the years. And then, every Chicago cop, that's really all the training that they do now, I think, is that they qualify once and they just watch a bunch of videos. That's it.
See now, I called Bob Tracy on my way down here, and I didn't get in touch with him. But I am absolutely positive that we put a second cycle in for the yearly qualifications, and with it came more training, not just going to the range and practicing your target shooting, but
And I retired 2 years ago, so it might have changed. But when I left, it was the mandatory training was you qualify 1 time a year. If you wanted to be physically fit, that was up to you. Nobody was looking over your shoulder like they should be.
yeah, and you would do the power test, right?
Yeah, and 19 years in a row because I thought that was important that you should be physically fit in that job. And but yeah, that's it. So now I know when I was in LA, they actually do a weekly training. So if you qualify expert, you can go to the range every Friday and qualify expert and get paid more. So they have like hundreds of officers in LAPD showing up to their police academy every week, which is great. And a lot of their units go to Camp Pendleton, which is Marine Corps base just south of them. They do a lot of room entry. They take it much more seriously than the Chicago Police Department does. And We need more because this is a very dangerous city. We have the most gangbangers of by far than any other city in the United States. Not even close. I think we have 120,000 gang members here. We're outgunned, so we need all that training. We certainly don't need training where you're doing mandatory sitting behind a computer, clicking right when you already have the answers given to you before the training starts.
Yeah.
You're being completely honest. So yeah, training is important. You need it. We don't have it.
Well, the other thing that you need is data, right? And this is something that really drives me nuts. The politics of the recent past has it that you know the strategy we put together, the gang violence strategy, where we wouldn't always go to the place of the shooting. We would realize because we had the data who the rival gang was, and we would go there and stop these guys from retaliating.
And it works.
And it worked. And what did we do? We eliminated the gang database. So politics, the way it interferes with what we do.
And also gang loitering. So gang loitering was a huge tool for cops because you could drive by any corner in a bad neighborhood and there'd be 8 guys in a corner. One of them's got a gun. You could basically say, get off the corner right now, because if I come back, you're all going to jail. And it was just, and that was taken away from us.
So it's gang, but you have to make sure people understand it wasn't just get off the corner. It was lawful to give them the order based upon the location. And if we come back and you're still there, you go to jail.
Yeah, that's right. But it was a tool because, Mrs. Ferguson down the street says, hey, can you guys help get these guys off the corner? Well, now the answer is no. So, or like, a young mother in the west side of Chicago wants to go to the park and she wants to take her child who's in a stroller. She wants to use the park. Well, she can't though, because there's 15 gang members with white t-shirts and White Sox hats sitting at the park and they're not going to move. And you can no longer tell them to move. I don't think people understand that. And that was a tool that we really, so similar.
Well, and the other thing, and I'm not sure if I mentioned this on any of our broadcasts yet, but quality of life enforcement, very important. And the best way to describe it is when I went to Newark and I asked about, do we do quality of life enforcement? And the chief told me, yeah, we have a strong program. I said, well, what's that? He says, well, we arrest everybody. And I said, what do you mean? I said, if a guy's working, in a Chinese kitchen on a hot July night, and at 11 o'clock when he gets off from work, he sits on his porch and has a Heineken, you arrest that guy? He says, well, yeah, it's a strong program. And I said, but you're catching dolphins with the sharks, right? And you don't want the dolphins, you want the sharks. So I said, how about this? How about we give people a ticket for those things, and if they have a warrant, then we arrest them. Or if there's another reason, we arrest them. And they're like, how can we possibly do quality of life enforcement when we're chasing gunshots? And Danny, I can't make this up. Probably 2 weeks into the program, 2 aggressive officers are driving down the street and they see a guy standing on the corner drinking a beer. And they get out of the car and they engage him for drinking a beer, and it turns into a frisk. And it turns out that he has a gun. And what do they do? They continue frisking him and they find a second gun, right? You're trained, right? You don't stop when you find one gun. And it turns out they take him into the district and they prosecute him. And they run him, and it turns out that he had just gotten out of prison after doing 6 years in the penitentiary for shooting somebody on that corner. And he was there that night to take his corner back. And the short end of that story is we prevented a murder by engaging somebody for drinking a beer on the street. So it goes well beyond just Mrs. Ferguson, who doesn't want to listen to the loud music on the corner, who is afraid to walk down the street because of these ferocious, terrifying gangbangers who happen to be standing there. Guys who carry guns also drink beer, right?
Right.
And, those are lessons that are being lost in the politics of policing across this country. And it was really troubling to me when I went to the IACP conference for the first time in probably 5 or 6 years, and all the chiefs were talking about DEI instead of crime. And I was like, what's going on here? We've lost our way. The profession is called law enforcement, right? And what do? We enforce the law. We don't make the law, we enforce the law. So I think it's swinging back. Certainly, we see the conflicts politically right now between the Democrats and the Republicans. It's ridiculous.
So cops aren't afraid of getting murdered. Cops aren't afraid of gang members. They're not. They're afraid of politicians.
Yeah,
They're afraid of their bosses. They're afraid of the media and what could happen if they do their job because cops were human.
yeah.
And you might make a mistake, and that's okay. But like you can't look at that mistake and destroy somebody's life. And that's a real thing now. I mean, you talk a lot about, and I know your history with 9/11. We felt what happened in Chicago after 9/11. We felt that here. People actually cared about the police, very supportive. It was a much different environment. And then slowly, maybe after, 1915, 16, and then finally at 20 was like the pinnacle of it. Completely looked as, we're looked as the aggressor and everything we do is wrong. So I hope that's coming back. I keep on thinking we reached bottom, and I think we probably have. We're on the way back. It feels like it maybe, but
When I was superintendent, we had 5 consecutive years of less crime, 1964 murder rates in 2013 and 2014, less police-related shootings. Police-related shootings during my tenure were less than half of 1% of the shootings in Chicago. But what happened with Laquan McDonald?
that's all they talk about.
That's all they talked about, right? So all of that went out the window, and the murder rate went up 67% the year after I got fired. And I'm not blaming anybody for that, but that's the snapback based upon the political situation that we got pushed into.
Right.
And politics and policing, it's never going to go away, but it's got to get tempered. It's got to get tempered. And
Just the arrest numbers and like I was my whole career I was a search warrant guy. So we were doing 250 a year. Well, I think I just saw a number that the city of Chicago. So you had thousands of search warrants done every year, and now it's like 200 to 300. Like it's not even close. The amount of arrests, and I understand the whole thing about you can't arrest your way out of a problem and all that stuff. You know what? There are people you have to arrest. This is a city that has bad guys in it and bad people in it, and it is your job to go get those guys. And it's not always easy. It's ugly.
yeah, it's not pretty.
Yeah, it doesn't always look pretty,
No.
but it's still our job.
Yeah.
And you just there's a correlation between both things.
Well, and the social justice warriors, they're not wrong. There's things in the history of this country that we can't correct. We can't change history. We can't change what happened that got us to this point. But there's 2 things that it's so common sense to realize that the police can reduce crime in the short term. And all of that fixing neighborhoods is a long-term solution to making it all stick. And if you look at the numbers in Chicago over the course of time, this is what the chart looks like. We do well, then we do terrible. We do well, then we do terrible. And
But isn't it like the 12th year in a row that Chicago leads the country in murders?
I'm not sure where we are today. And I
I think I
gotta,
read that.
I gotta say this. It might be true. I don't know, but I do know this. And Larry Snelling, I think is doing a great job. I listen to him. He's saying all the right things. And the crime numbers, certainly the shooting numbers and the murder numbers, are down from what they were. But let's realize something. Having done this for a long time, in 2000, I took over New York's crime strategy, right? In 1995, I started my first precinct command. And from 1995 to today, I've been studying the numbers and tracking how we're doing. And the bottom line is people talk about, well, we're down from last year, but last year was 800, okay? And we had 400. Now, I'm making those numbers up, right? Except for the 400, that's true. But, you can't do it from year to year. You have to look at a longer term trend. But the long term trend gets interrupted when you take away things like ShotSpotter, when you start defunding the police, when you start talking about, you know, the best way to stop a bullet is a job. Sounds great. I don't really believe it. Because you know what? The gangbangers don't want to work. They don't want to work. What they want to do is stand on the corner. It gives them street cred and being in the gang and so on and so forth. It's part of a culture that needs to be changed, which is not going to change by the police, and it's not going to change by defunding the police. How it's going to change is the short-term solutions and the long-term solutions. But nobody thinks like that because of 4-year political cycles. When DOJ was coming to Chicago after the Laquan McDonald shooting, the press came to me and said, well, what do you think they're going to find? They said they're going to say that there's systemic racism, that there's poor training and poor supervision. And they said, well, why do you say that? Because that's what they said in the other 27 investigations they did before this one.
I hope that this is on the way back up and things start to change and maybe common sense comes back, because City of Chicago deserves that.
The danger of doing a car stop is overwhelming, and people don't realize it, especially when they've got tinted windows and you can't see who's inside the car or what they're doing. So I've got to tell you, in my police career, 99.9% of the car stops I did, my gun was at least on, my hand was at least on my gun. We had a trick in New York back in the day. We had the long duty coats. And what we all did was we had our off-duty in the pocket, in the left-hand pocket of that. And you're talking to the guy, but I've actually got my gun in my hand and he didn't know it. And once you get past that tactical situation, you could bring everything down.
Sure.
You could explain to them why you're stopping them, what's going on, and take it from there. But that's all lost. It's all part of history that nobody wants to talk about. And like you said, it's dangerous. Ella French got killed. Carlos Yanes got killed. Almost got killed during a car stop. Car stops are incredibly dangerous. The bad guys know it. And then we've got the city wants to give money to the family of somebody who shot at the cops and then got killed during a car stop.
And I think that cop will never work again, too. I think I'm right about that. The cop who was shot in the 11th district there won't go back to work.
But how is that possible? Where's the practical nature?
Like you said, I hope that this is on the way back up and things start to change and maybe common sense comes back, because City of Chicago deserves that.
Well, I got to tell you something. I am so happy that Fox 32 has given me this opportunity to talk about this stuff without guardrails. There's nobody except for my wife. Kristen tells me what to do all the time, obviously. But you know, these are topics that people refuse to talk about. And I'm gonna talk about it again. I'm gonna talk about it again and again and again. The quote unquote stop and frisk policy is not a stop and frisk policy. It's a United States Supreme Court decision that said that the police can stop people based upon articulable, reasonable suspicion, and if appropriate, frisk them. We don't get to stop people based upon the population demographic. We stop them based upon crime trends. And we did an analysis back in 2014 when it kind of blew up in New York. My press guy said to me, you know, they're going to come after you because you ran New York's crime strategy, and suddenly there's this problem in New York and lawsuits. He says, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to do analysis. And it turns out that arrest data and description of offender by victim matched up in every one of the 77 neighborhoods in Chicago within 1 or 2 percentage points of offender description and arrests for all crimes. In Englewood, 98% African American, 100% African American offenders for robberies, shootings, and murders, right? You know, and that one guy in Englewood would get stopped a couple of hundred times a day if that were the case, that we would stop people based upon population demographics. It would do absolutely nothing for the crime rate. But that's the standard that the ACLU and Department of Justice used to hold us to. I don't know what's going to happen now, but that's what happened in the Obama era. I hate to say it. I don't want to blame Obama. I met the man a number of times, articulate, charismatic, well-informed, but by the same token, when DOJ was coming to Chicago after the Laquan McDonald shooting, press came to me and said, well, what do you think they're going to find? They said they're going to say that there's systemic racism, that there's poor training and poor supervision. And they said, well, why do you say that? Because that's what they said in the other 27 investigations they did before this one.
Right.
And it turns out that's exactly what they found. And here's something else that people don't realize. When DOJ came to Chicago and said that our training was not adequate, people don't realize that that is monitored by the Illinois State Training Board. And our standards surpassed what they held us to, right? We did more training and better training. As a matter of fact, the training program on procedural justice was adopted nationwide that we put out here with Tracy Mears and Tom Tyler. Remember that?
I do.
And yet DOJ comes here and says our training is inadequate. Well, that means that every training program in the state of Illinois is inadequate.
Right.
Where did that happen? And who took care of that? So, I mean, the mirrors and smoke that we deal with is overwhelming. And that puts us in the positions that we reached.
I agree. Cops just need to be supported. It's a thankless job. I mean, it's a great job. It's the funniest job in the world. I mean, every day you run into crazy stuff. The first thing that I ran into, so when I started right out of the police academy, I got sent to 12th, and that's the near West District. And actually, my buddy Rob, who was in the Marines with me from Green Bay, he actually tested the same day I did. We both got sent to the academy the same day. Both graduated. Both went to 12. So we were on the wagon, the paddy wagon in 12th. And they closed.
You can't say that. You can't say that, paddy wagon.
Okay, well, let's rewind. Just the wagon end, because it's against the Irish. But it was called the Death Wagon because
Freddie Gray.
no, it was not, because we had the medical district and we had all the bodies in the city of Chicago basically got filtered through 12. And so every day that we would get out of roll call, there'd be about 6 or 7 bodies. And the morgue was also in 12. So 6 or 7 bodies were in our wagon. We get in, and they were in white bags with zippers. And it was our job, basically, as cops, to basically drive all these bodies, hundreds of bodies. I think probably 300 or 400 that we drove. 17 in one day we counted, but we would drive them to the morgue. And everything that could go wrong with these bodies went wrong. Everything. These were like the flimsiest bags ever. So as we would grab a bag, these bodies would, it probably was rated for like maybe 120-pound human.
Oh, boy.
So the bottoms would break out of these bags. These Chicagoans who are now passed away are now on Chicago streets. And then these young cops had to figure out, all right, what do I do now? Got to bring them back into the wagon. And then you eventually end up at the morgue with all these bodies. And I remember at the morgue, there's an old Italian guy. It was his death examiner. He probably 6 years old, barrel-chested, 6 years old, had this crazy sixth sense of humor, which you would need. And all these bodies he's processing, that's all he does. And I asked him one day, I said, what is the craziest thing you've ever seen? And he said, listen, kid, it's 2 things. He said, the first thing is, you see that door right there? That's the door right there that opens. Behind there is all the dead bodies in Chicago. I'm sitting at this desk I'm sitting at right now. That door opens. Naked guy walks out, has white powder all over him, asked me he goes, where am I? He said, and then the guy said, well, you're at the morgue. And then he looked like he was kind of wobbly, so he called an ambulance. They came and then pronounced him dead another 30 minutes later because he had been mispronounced by a doctor at one of the hospitals, whether it was Rush or Cook County Hospital or UIC. And then he said, the craziest thing I've ever seen. Same door opens. This time it's a younger guy, white powder all over him. He had managed to crawl down out of a bag, out of a box from the third level, comes down, kicks open the door, looks at me, and he says, "Where am I?" He said, "You're at the morgue, buddy." And he said, "My name is so-and-so. You call my wife right now and you tell her, don't spend the money." And that guy went on to sue the doctor because once again, they got him with a weak heart or no heartbeat. Turned he had a weak heartbeat. Sued the doctor, made millions. The hospital, I don't know which hospital it was. And then that guy turned out to he had lived years from that point on. But that was my introduction to the police department.
That was Monty Python. Not
Right?
quite
Yeah,
dead
they
yet.
just can't make it out. Like we would have these hospitals. We'd go out to all these hospitals and the dungeons of the hospitals, and they'd give us more bodies. They would have these gurneys, and these things would just like give way constantly. So it was like a wrestling match. My buddy Rob and I would be trying to make sure the body didn't fall.
Yeah.
They would every time.
And
We're just trying to preserve life, but that's the welcome, the police department. But it's funny. You have to find a humor in things because
look, one of my favorite crazy stories, again, was when I was a lieutenant in the 4-4 precinct in the Bronx. It's a 4 to 12 on Halloween night, 1990, and it's just coming apart at the seams, and I'm in charge. So we have a shooting. We have a foot pursuit with a man with a gun who gets into a building. Naturally, the cop gets stuck at the lobby door. The elevator door opens, and a woman comes out. Guy grabs her around, takes her back into the elevator. So I've got that going on. But in the middle of this, there's a vehicle pursuit with a car that was carjacked. And it's in the area just north of Yankee Stadium, which is hilly. And the car comes down a hill and tries to make a right turn to get onto the Major Deegan Expressway. And it doesn't. And it hits a gate and it flips over 3 times. And out at a gallop, of course, come the 3 bad guys. We're on television, right?
Right.
3 bad guys, and they run under the Major Deegan Expressway. So there's shots fired back and forth. This is all happening live. I got a woman with a gun to her head. This is happening. So I run to the shooting first because I'm closer to it, and we get there, and they don't realize that they ran into a fenced-in area. By Yankee Stadium. We catch all 3 guys. Everybody separate them back to the station house. We catch the guy with the woman. I go back into the station house and I said, I go into the first guy and I said, "What's your story?" He says, "Well, I'm coming out my house and my buddy came up with this BMW and said, let's take a ride." So I took a ride. I said, "Okay." I go into the second guy. I said, "What's your story?" He says, "So I'm coming out my house and my buddy pulls up with this BMW and said, let's take a ride." So I took a ride. I go into the third guy. I said, "What's your story?" He says, "Well, I was having sex with this guy under the Major Deegan Expressway. And all of a sudden there's shots fired and everybody's running everywhere." So I started running. I said, "Would you repeat that, please?" He says it again. So I go back into the first guy. I said, "You know the number 2?" He says, "Yeah, that's my guy. We grew up together." It's okay. What about the third guy? He says, I've never seen that guy in my life." I go into the second guy. I said, "You know number 1, right?" He says, Yeah, that's my guy. We grew up together." I said, "What about number 3? He says, "I've never seen that guy in my life." I go in and I'm like, "All right, you see what you get? Dust them off, never get out of here."
What happens?
Right? Don't have sex under the Major Deegan Expressway and these things wouldn't happen. I know this from my dad, that the Marine Corps has always focused on accuracy of fire, not volume of fire. And, that training it saved that kid's life. And what you and your wife, Karen, are doing, and what you've done in your police career, and the example that you set for your children, is why they are who they are and who they're going to be. So Danny wasn't just a victim of violence. He actually had some heroic things that he did, including a story that was headlines here in Chicago when it occurred. There was a dog, which unfortunately I believe was a pit bull. If I understand dogs correctly, I used to train and show dogs. Pit bulls are not naturally aggressive the way that they're pictured now. That's gangbangers make them that way and do dogfighting and stuff like that. But Danny has a story about that made headlines. Tell us how that played out, Dad.
I was just a sergeant. I was the sergeant in Inglewood District, uh, early morning, and there was a dog. There was a call that a dog was just literally mauling people. It was a pit bull, and this dog, the calls kept on coming out around 59th and Stewart area, and I was close enough, but I headed that way. But as I approached, there was people in the street, numerous people that had been torn up by this dog. One guy was still just writhing in pain. Ambulance, I think the ambulance was called, and then it had bitten 4 or 5 people. Long story short, I saw this dog. I got eyes on this dog, and the dog took off just through a couple vacant yards, and there was a maybe a 13 or 14-year-old kid, and he was on his way to school. You could see his backpack. He had actually a uniform on, and I saw the dog beeline towards him, and then that dog just went right after him. And so now I'm kind of in the car, and I'm gonna do what I have to do to get this dog, because that dog could kill him.
Sure.
So I got to him. The dog was tearing up his leg. And I wasn't that close to him, but I knew I had to shoot this
How
dog.
far away were you? That's really what I want to know.
I was a little bit far. When I took that first shot, I was a little bit far, and I knew that I could also hit the kid.
Yeah.
So I had to really focus on that first shot. And I shot that dog when he was on top of that kid. And it didn't even really do anything. He stopped maybe tearing him up, but he didn't initially get off. So I was at that point moving towards him, and I got close enough where I started shooting him more, and I started landing shots into him, and then he finally moved off the boy, and then I just took whatever was left in my magazine, and I just killed the dog. But the boy was, and I called for an ambulance. Ambulance took this kid. I never saw him again. I hope he's doing well. I hope he, had a good life. But he went to the hospital. He had a ton of stitches and staples all the way up his leg, and I was just in the right place at the right time. I was surrounded by great people, great bosses. Leo Schmitz was my boss. He showed up there, and actually you showed up there too, which I appreciated. I was told that superintendent wants to talk to you, and it's usually not a good thing, but you actually saw the news or something, and then you showed up to Inglewood and shook my hand, so it was very cool.
Well, it's got to be terrifying and again, this is training. This is where your training kicks in. And one of the things about the Marine Corps is I know this from my dad, that the Marine Corps has always focused on accuracy of fire, not volume of fire. And, that training it saved that kid's life. That training probably saved that kid's life. Because I got to tell you
At the
something.
right place at the right time.
Yeah,
God was looking out for me. I don't know what it was.
God was looking out for him.
For both of us, right? But that I think he was going to kill him. I mean, he was on top of him, and they said animal control said it was a 90-pound pit bull. I thought it was much bigger than that, but still 90 pounds is a big animal.
Yeah.
And it had bitten numerous people.
The decision to shoot at a dog who's on top of a 13-year-old kid is a very difficult decision to make, and it's literally life and death in a heartbeat. I was very fortunate for all the guns that I was involved in making arrests with. I never fired my gun except at the range. I came real close a number of times. I thought I fired a shot once, and we had revolvers back in the day, and I checked my gun, and it turns out that the cylinder had turned. I had actually pulled the trigger and let it go because I was tracking a guy who was pointing a gun at me and running. And as I came here, there was a guy leaning against a car with his back to me as the guy got right there, and I thought I fired a shot. Well, it turned out he had a warrant, so I locked up both of them. But
Right.
I never fired a shot. But that's got to be terrifying to make that decision, And I'm sure it's in your head that
The moment you're not,
what if I hit this kid?
of course it was.
Yeah.
So when I got shot, what happened if those kids in that kitchen were shot?
Yeah.
Right. Which easily, I don't know how those bullets missed them. they hit us, but they certainly should have hit them too. But
Yeah.
anyway, I was very fortunate.
And you did a great job.
Thank you.
So I want you to talk about your family real quick. Tell me about what your sons are doing, because I think that
And my
this
sister.
and your daughter, this really tells the story of how I love to close this show.
I'm very fortunate. Yeah, my wife and Karen and I have been married for 24 years. Just had our anniversary, and just to say, she's been through all this too. It's important to say that too. It's not been easy, right? It's not easy on a spouse, or it's not easy on kids. It's not easy on anybody. So, um, my oldest son is Brendan, is a Marine Corps second lieutenant. He's out in Virginia right now. Um, my son Timmy is 20 years old. He's at the University of Notre Dame studying math, and he's also in Marine Corps ROTC. He wants to be an officer as well. He's on the path for that.
And how's he doing?
He's doing fantastic. He's a straight A student. He's a great kid. I'm very, very lucky. My daughter I just had her track meet today. She's graduating high school next week, and she's going to U of I. She wants to be a physician's assistant. And my youngest, Declan, is just a great kid, plays basketball. He's a good kid. I love hanging out with him, a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm blessed.
Oh, but you've earned it. That's really the point, and that's how I wanted to close tonight. At the end of the day, being a police officer, being a United States Marine, are two things that should be almost like religious. They should be treated in that fashion in my book.
Thank you.
Having been raised by my dad, which, like I said, wasn't easy. Don't think it was easy, but the things that he taught us put me and my brothers on the path that we all succeeded with. And my mom was tougher than my dad, but in a different way. Greatest generation, Great Depression, World War II, thought nothing of it, came home, got a job, went right back to work, blue collar individuals. And what you and your wife, Karen, are doing, and what you've done in your police career, and the example that you've set for your children, is why they are who they are and who they're going to be. So,
Thank you.
without a doubt, Danny, it's my pleasure. I'm so happy that I got to know you. And you never know where you're going to end up in life. I never imagined I'd be in Chicago. I never imagined that I would run police departments. But, everything, I believe, happens for a
We
reason.
live about a mile away from each other.
Yeah.
See each other socially. Yeah, it's been great. Yeah, it's been an honor.
So, again, I believe, and I think that Danny is a great example of it, that being a police officer is one of the most noble things that an individual can do with their life. And that wraps us for tonight.
Appreciate that.
I appreciate you, Danny, and I appreciate everybody who serves, whether it's in the military or the police department, always on their team. So thank you for watching, and we'll be back with more from Wearing the Badge. We've made the shift from Behind the Badge. So thank you for being here tonight. Thanks, Dan.
You're welcome.